This is the port of Tianjin. It's the largest port in northern China and the main maritime gateway to Beijing. Through here, thousands of tons of commodities and products are taken in to fuel the great machine that is the PRC. For decades, it is this maritime hotspot that has acted as the propellant for China's rise on the world stage. Now, following some disturbing decisions and unfortunate timing, it is the same port where we see the demise of the world economy begin. To tell this great story, we first have to take a few steps back and look at some history and some data. In today's video, we explore coal, inflation, and investigate why these two nations could very well bring down the world economy. We start with some background. What you need to understand is that China is the world's largest energy consumer. It uses up almost 2 times more energy than the United States, and to fuel this thirst for power, it has looked towards a rock that is hated by most in the Western world: coal. Almost 65% of the electricity produced in China comes from this source, and unlike nations in the West which have began their move towards cleaner alternatives, China is showing no signs of slowing down its use. Now you may be thinking, how does this have anything to do with the world economy? But as you will see in a minute, a crisis in the coal world is emerging, and the effects of this are spilling into the fragile supply chain. See, over 1 year ago, China made a wild decision to ban the import of coal from Australia. This may on paper seem to be no big deal, but as we're seeing today, this decision has drastically changed the world economy and may even destroy it in the near future. Following some serious political tension after Australia's Scott Morrison called for an investigation into the origins of a well-known health crisis that I cannot mention without getting demonetized, Xi and company quickly reacted by de facto cutting off Australian coal imports in April of 2020. This left dozens of Australian ships stranded off the coast of Beijing, awaiting a truce between the two governments. But after almost 1 whole year, the truce never came, and the Australian ships found other customers elsewhere. Essentially, China declared a trade war over a few sentences spoken by Mr. Morrison. Looking back at it, this PRC flex was supposed to be a simple show of power and a nice clean win for the Chinese. After all, China has an economy 10 times larger than Australia. And one would think that in the unfair world of diplomacy, the Australians would have just given in, apologized, and saved their large and thriving exports industry. But instead, the opposite has happened. The plan backfired. You see, unlike most other developed nations, China is extremely reliant on coal for its electrical use, and while it only needs to import about 6% of its daily total use, it's very sensitive to any volume changes. Following the recovery from the pandemic, coal use shot up. The Chinese export machine roared back to life, and electricity-guzzling factories began to churn out everything from electronics to home appliances. Now the import ban has a huge effect, and a lack of supply to meet this explosion in demand has resulted in coal prices soaring. Thermal coal on some exchanges has tripled in price, and mining volume within Chinese borders has fallen due to supply constraints and other post-pandemic issues that have resulted in a perfect storm. Now, Chinese coal-fired plants have simply begun to shut down, resulting in blackouts that are creating serious disruptions in the supply chain. Australia is laughing for now. This news clip summarizes the situation perfectly. Take a listen.
It's now something you're going to enjoy. China last year punished us, wicked Australians, not giving in, not shutting up about human rights and things like that. In fact, China produced a list of 14 things we supposedly did wrong. And one of the ways it punished us for these sins was to ban our coal exports to China. Now, luckily, we found other buyers in other countries because our coal is actually about the world's best. But for China, that ban has backfired. Trying to find other coal suppliers has sent the price that China pays for its imports of coal absolutely soaring, and has led to shortages so bad that there are now blackouts in China and screams there to find more supplies urgently. Ask Russia, ask Mongolia. What with winter coming? I think it's wonderful to see evil punished for a change.
But while it's nice to see David beat Goliath on occasion, the long-term impact of this situation could be severe. You see, Australia's coal is so high quality that China is actually buying it from India and Mongolia for a premium. Yes, that means they're buying the same coal for a higher price just to save face, avoiding buying it from Australia directly. The Chinese government just 3 days ago ordered the country's mines to produce, quote, as much coal as possible, as it tries to increase production as winter approaches. Reports of Chinese cities going dark are widespread, and factories that produce many of the products we use in the West are getting worried. Interruptions are pushing the supply chain to the limit, and all of this is feeding into inflationary psychology. You see, on this channel, we've talked about the fact that inflation is largely psychological. If people perceive goods will be hard to find and more expensive in the future, they will simply begin to hoard them, buying up as much as they can right now. This in turn pushes demand much higher and prices skyrocket. We're seeing that today with many products, and this loop can get out of control rather quickly. When prices skyrocket, people ask for higher wages, and those prices are then cemented going forward. The inflationary loop that starts with something as simple as coal can grow to include everything from houses, food, and most importantly, wages. We are seeing inflation concerns everywhere. The CEO of Twitter, Jack Dorsey, now mentions hyperinflation as a real possibility. The far-fetched ideas pushed by many like Peter Schiff are starting to slowly become a reality. The more people are aware, the faster the loop cycles. What starts off as a conspiracy theory grows exponentially into a rapidly moving disaster. The more governments interfere to patch it, the worse it gets. Small problems that seem transitory slowly escalate into serious issues threatening the world economy. As the buying power of normal everyday Americans decreases, those who once dismissed this danger have no choice but to acknowledge it. Inflation is no longer a subject of debate. It's clearly happening. Now the debate has shifted to predicting how long and how bad it will get. Billionaire Paul Tudor Jones recently went on CNBC and stated that the number one issue facing investors right now is inflation. Take a listen to this quick clip that shows how bad things can really get.
I think the thing that to me is the number one issue facing the Main Street investors is inflation. And it's pretty clear to me that inflation is not transitory. It's here to stay. And it's probably the single biggest threat to certainly financial markets. And again, probably, I think, to society just in general. So this 5.4% CPI is a real eye-opener. It's the highest CPI we've had in 30 years. And, of course, it's going to go higher here in the next few months as energy feeds through it. So for an investor in particular, most of this audience, it's absolute death for a 60-40 portfolio, for a long stock, long bond portfolio. So the real question is, how do you defend yourself against it? How persistent will this be? And what does the outlook hold? And there's a combination of structural and cyclical forces that right now are all rolling in the same direction to say that inflation can be much worse.
The Chinese and Australian coal markets may seem like distant, unrelated things to what's happening in the worldwide economy, but commodities are the basis for all other costs and form the foundation in an inflationary environment. While it may seem far-fetched that higher coal costs lead to worldwide economic disaster, the chain linking the world economy is formed by these exact materials. Coal, oil, and other metals feed input costs throughout the world, raise the price, and shockwaves are felt everywhere. It's like the ripple effect. A small initial disturbance to a system propagates to disturb an increasingly large portion of the system. I would love to hear from all of you working in these industries. Are you feeling the impact of inflationary psychology, and how is your firm dealing with it? As always, thank you guys for watching. Please make sure you hit that like and subscribe button if you enjoyed the content.